Once again, I'm Donna Berman. I'm the Executive Director of the Charter Oak Cultural Center, and we are just delighted that you are here tonight for this really, really fun conversation with Duby McDowell. Before I introduce Duby, I'm going to just tell you a couple of things about Charter Oak. You know, we're a multicultural arts center that does the work of social justice through the arts. And we have a bunch of really great programming coming up. So, you know, please go to our website. Please sign up for our e-blasts. They're really quite fun. They have lots of surprises in them. Just to give you an overview, coming up every Wednesday, we have a discussion of the 1619 project. And it's really a wonderful conversation. And it's been ongoing, but you can join at any time. We're just reading the text out loud together. So there's no problem with you joining now, even though it's been going on for a while. We'll make you feel very, very comfortable, I promise. We have an art show opening on February 11th. It's the art of Yabo Ibo Mendingo, and it's really a wonderful show. We hope that you'll come to that. And then on Friday night, February 17th, we have Read It and Sleep. Once a month, we have this program, and we have a community person. If you'd like to volunteer to do this, by the way, we'd love you to. We have a community person read a story to the kids, and there's a dinner, and then the story, and then hot chocolate, and then we get the kids all buzzed up with sugar and send them home. But no, we really don't. Everybody's relaxed, and they leave, and it's really a lovely, lovely experience. Then on Saturday, April 1st, we're going to have the Ted Hershey Dance Marathon. It's the first time since 2019 that we're going to do it live. And it's a wonderful evening of dance. All kinds of dance companies from all over Connecticut come to Charter Oak to perform. And then on May 8th, we have our gala. And we hope that you'll come. This is one of our main sources of revenue to do all the wonderful things that we do. So we'd love you to join us for that. And it's a lot of fun. And there's live music and dancing, and the kids perform, and Cafe Louise is catering it. It's going to be at Congregation Beth Israel, and it's really going to be a blast. We hope that you can join for that. And then one more thing that we haven't firmed up the dates yet, but many of you have come to our classes with Ponder Goddard, and she's going to do another series, by a 4-part series based on the work of Rianne Eisler, who wrote the Chalice and the Blade, and many works since then. So we'll keep you posted about that. But sign up for our e-blast, and you'll get all kinds of great information, and you can look on our website too. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker for tonight. Duby McDowell is the president of McDowell Communications Group, a strategic communications firm based in Hartford. She is probably best known for being Channel 3's political reporter for many years, and her frequent appearances as a political analyst. She is married with 2 20-something daughters who live where? In the Lower East Side. So there's some irony to that. Duby and I have kind of known each other for many, many years. And she's one of those people, and I think anybody who knows her will know that this is true. You just like her right away. And even though we really haven't had a formal relationship, when she wrote me an email, I think it was in September, last September, to ask me about something, I immediately answered and was curious, because I just have been a big fan of hers for such a long time. And in the course of discussing this thing that we're going to do in the summer together, she told me the story of her grandfather, and I said, would you come and give a talk about that at Charter Oak online? And she was so gracious and so generous and said yes immediately. So welcome to Moishe Teichman, to Arthur Murray, the evolution of an identity. You're going to hear an amazing story by an amazing storyteller and a wonderful, wonderful human being, Duby McDowell, and it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce her to you now. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Donna. And I, having been on TV for many years, I don't usually get nervous doing presentations, but I am a little nervous about this because I think my family is a little bit late to really understanding and thinking about our Jewish roots. We were raised so Episcopalian, as I will discuss. And I'm really just now in the past, couple decades, learning about and appreciating my grandfather's background and therefore my background. So this was really, I can't say I jumped at the chance to do this because I'm nervous about it, but it's really been great. So thank you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be with you. And, you know, I feel like your grandparents were such a part of my childhood. I think probably a lot of people in our audience tonight feel that way too. They were like a touchstone. So it's such a pleasure to kind of go back in time and learn more about them. Can you tell us a little bit about the story that you told me actually, yes, we talked on the phone in September.
Well, I'll give you a brief sense of my grandfather's career. And Barbara is kindly behind the scenes putting up some pictures for us. Barbara, if we can put that first picture of my grandfather as a little boy. He came to this country when he was, I think, 1 year old. His father, Abraham, had come before him from a town in Austria, on the Austria-Poland border. And so they came because they were persecuted and hungry. Like I'm sure so many people in this audience have, may have ancestors who experienced the same thing. His father came over first, made some money selling pencils on the corner and teaching Hebrew lessons in the Lower East Side. And then there's my grandfather, and then was able to send a little bit of money to bring over his wife, Sarah, and my grandfather, who was Moses or Moishe. So as a young boy, he was living in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, incredibly poor. His mother made some money. She was very resourceful as a baker. And he went to read from a book that my aunt wrote, a memoir. She said, dance history was made one cold January evening when gangly 14-year-old Moishe hesitantly opened the door of the Henry Street settlement near his tenement. He scanned the list of classes, American history, literature, net cooking, then found what he wanted, social dancing. So apparently this young boy with not much education, but a lot of drive, realized that in the early 1900s, dancing was really becoming a thing in this country. Not so much what there he is as a young boy. Some of these dances were taking the country by storm, and you may know some of the names. Oh, the bunny hug, the turkey trot, the grizzly bear. This is dances, especially by 1912. So he took lessons at Castle House. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Irene and Vernon Castle, but they were great ballroom dancers. He took lessons there, and he caught the eye of this baroness who said, you're very good at dancing and good at teaching. Self-taught and having gone to the Castle's school. Went down to Asheville, North Carolina with her. Very quickly, she said to him, your name, Moishe Teichman, that's not going to work. We're going to Asheville, to the where the Vanderbilts and all the society people were. She suggested changing the name to Arthur Murray, and he became very sought after as a dance teacher and taught special classes of young girls. He comes back up to New York. I'll try to move this along quickly. Comes back up to New York, very, very resourceful. Starts to get this idea of teaching dancing by mail. So do we have those pictures there, Barbara, of the footsteps? You all have probably seen, well, we use them all for so many things now, but the footsteps that show you how to dance, my grandfather came up with this idea as a way to teach people. So you would send away by mail, I guess he advertised in magazines and that kind of thing. He came up with that. He was on the radio before many others were. And then he also eventually, they had this television show that I don't remember because I was born in 1960, but their show was a live television show, 1950 to 1960. Oh, they're the footprints we were talking about. That happens to be how to do the Roomba. And their television show was on many different networks. It was kind of a fill-in show, I guess. But it was free advertising for the studios, which by that point were all over the country. I learned recently that my grandfather's studios, that he was the second franchise. It's the second franchise in the US. I don't know what the first is, but the Arthur Murray Studios were the second. And so they really achieved this incredible fame. In the 60s, they decided to retire and they sold the studios. So sadly, we don't have anything to do with the Arthur Murray Studios anymore, though I love to be in a city and drive by and they still are have the same name. But that was his career. And, people are always shocked when they hear that his name wasn't Arthur Murray, it was Moishe Teichman. So I'll leave that's the career, the quick thumbnail of it.
And he thought of that idea for the footsteps? Like, that's so brilliant.
Yes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I was just somewhere the other day. We use those now because of COVID, stand here 6 feet apart. I'm like, they're the footprints that he came up with.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's really quite amazing. What was the role of Judaism, do you think, in his life?
Well, it played a huge role as a young man. His mother's father was a rabbi, but his mother was once she came over to the US, she had no use for religion. She said, what God would let people burn down our house. They'd been really, badly treated back in Austria, as so many Jews have. And what God would let that happen? I guess they had a terrible thing where they had a sick baby. The doctor wouldn't treat the baby because the baby was Jewish. Baby dies. So she had no real interest in religion. Here she is, the daughter of a rabbi. Her husband, however, was quite religious. But for my grandfather, I think probably the story of so many people of that era, it was really, all about assimilating and trying to get out of the world that he was growing up in the tenements of the Lower East Side. And so I think part of, changing his name, of course, was putting aside being Jewish. And, growing up, my mother and her twin sister, I don't know if Barbara, if it's easy to find the picture there of, there's a shot of grandma and grandpa on either side of two twin daughters. They're all sort of leaning together. Anyway, to just give you a sense of my mother and her twin sister, they grew up, they didn't even know they were Jewish. My aunt, who is really the historian of the family, writes in her memoir that she doesn't quite remember when her mother told her she was Jewish, but it was a sort of thing where you had to be told because they grew up and they did Christmas and they lived in Rye, New York, with easy commuting distance to the main studio office in New York, and, went to Rye Country Day with all the other little Episcopalian children, or children at least whose names did not sound Jewish, because some of them may have changed their names as well. So it was not a big part of his life, but I will say that Oh, that's my grandfather on the right, my grandmother on the left, and then my mother and her sister, my mother's Phyllis, and her sister Jane. But towards the end of his life, it felt as though occasionally he would make comments that as so many people do towards the end of their life, they're sort of harking back to their childhood. And we all in the family shared a few examples of that. Did you hear Grandpa mention that what the rabbi used to do when he was being trained for his bar mitzvah? We're all like, wow, because again, we grew up with we all went to Episcopalian church. We were baptized and confirmed. We almost hardly knew we were Jewish too, because it was just no part of my mother's life.
Huh. How do you relate to Judaism now? How do you consider it to be part of your identity?
Now I do. I did not at all growing up. I knew I knew my mother was Jewish, and I knew I was half Jewish, though many would say I'm fully Jewish because my mother's Jewish. But I just wasn't raised with it. So it was like, oh, that's neat. I'm half Jewish, but I didn't relate to it. I would say I didn't care about it. I mean, I wasn't embarrassed about it, I just didn't care. Sounds so trite, but I think it wasn't until my eldest daughter went to preschool at the JCC in West Hartford. And the reason we went there is we have a very good friend who worked there. She said, you have to come, it's a wonderful preschool. It's one of the best in the area, as everybody knows. I think going there, bringing her, them lighting the Shabbat candles at their little lunch on Friday. I don't know. I feel as though I started to learn more about the Jewish holidays and just a whole host of things. So I think my appreciation grew. And I think having, increasing number of exposure to different people. And, now one of my daughters has dated a young man she's very young, but they've dated for many years. They've known each other a long time, and he's Jewish. And it just sort of adds to my sort of growing connection, I think, to those roots. And when my aunt came out with her memoir about her very interesting life, and it got into such detail of my grandfather's background, I think that sort of strengthened the connection for me too.
What was your grandmother's role in the whole business and the footstep, like the whole thing?
Yeah. They married when he was quite a bit older. He was already a famous dance teacher, as my aunt writes. He was about 29. My grandmother was 18. So he's from a poor family, Lower East Side, Austrian Jews. My grandmother had grown up in Jersey City. Her father was, she was Jewish. They were from Prague, had been in the country for many decades and were considered, I'm trying to remember the phrase my aunt used, but they were from a sort of, upper crust Jewish family, and but also not very religious either. So that sort of the two of them together, they were both Jewish, which was nice, but there wasn't a whole lot of religion going on. My grandmother, whereas my grandfather was tall, gangly, except when he danced, had a stutter. My grandmother was very charming, could play to the camera, was a wonderful hostess and presenter. So when my grandfather comes back one day, I guess, in the early 50s, and said, I bought time on a television station so we can have a show and have dancers and do dance lessons. And she said, oh, I hope you're going to enjoy that. And he said, but you're going to be the hostess of the show. And indeed she was. And so she was also very ambitious as well. And they really worked on building the studios together. They were quite a team in that way.
All my memories of your grandfather are with your grandmother on TV.
Yes.
And I remember, I was watching like Mike Douglas show or something, but I remember they came out from behind a curtain and your grandmother did all of the talking.
Yeah.
Right. And he stood next to her and rather stiffly. And then they put the music on and he was as graceful. It was he seemed to almost change when he was dancing. Was that your impression too? Like, was he different?
Well, I think that's a big part of why he was interested early on in ballroom dancing as a young person. He was shy, didn't know how to talk to girls. He kind of got this idea that if he could be a graceful, if you could be a ballroom dancer, everybody wants to dance with the good dancer. And so that really was a part of his personality that he kind of transformed a bit when he was on the dance floor and when he was teaching his students too.
You could really see that transformation. Did you think his stutter had something to do with how shy he was?
Oh, I think so. And it's actually we have members of our family who I'm learning now that it's a bit hereditary. Some members who stutter. He didn't stutter terribly, but enough that like you would not make him, the front man in a television show. So I'm sure the stuttering led to the shyness.
What was your relationship like with him?
Well, we saw them, it sounds crazy, even though they lived in Honolulu, they retired to Hawaii in the mid 60s, I would say. We went out there a fair amount to go visit, which was obviously a lot of fun. And in the years before they moved out there, I grew up in North Haven, outside New Haven, and they were in Rye, New York. So, it wasn't one of those things where I spent a ton of quality time with him, but certainly enough. And he could be very nice, but he could be very gruff. And I think he was very gruff father, as often happens. A gruff father maybe sometimes softens a little by the time he's a grandfather. But I do, of the many wonderful and generous things he did for me, I do have to say I was a little bit scarred when I went to college, undergraduate, and then I went to journalism school as a graduate student. And I was with my grandfather one time, and he said, "Your voice is too nasal to go into broadcasting." And I remember just being sort of crestfallen. But he was a self-made man who had pulled himself up. He was extremely sure of his opinions. And as is the case with many self-made people, I think, he felt that he was right.
Did your grandparents have a good marriage?
Yes, I think for the most part they did. I think the business kept them together in many ways. I mean, they were on the same track. They were equally ambitious. They stayed together and, for forever. They both died in their mid-90s.
Wow.
He was 10 years older, so she had a number of years on her own.
Well, that's a commercial for doing ballroom dancing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They really were believers in exercise. And, even in an era when people, that wasn't sort of the thing, they really, they exercised and they ate in a very healthy way. Where that came from, I don't know, but.
Did you have a sense growing up that they were famous?
Oh, yes. Yes. Because at that time, so I'm a little girl in the 60s, they had just finished being on television. And so I remember walking down the street one time with my grandfather, and a man coming up to him saying, "You're that dancing fellow, aren't you?" And so my grandfather, who probably heard that all the time, was like, "Yes, I'm Fred Astaire," But they hung out with other celebrities too, which we liked. Like when we'd go to Hawaii, they hung out with Jack Lord, if any of you remember Hawaii Five-0. And we're talking like old celebrities like Burt Parks, who sang "Here She Comes Miss America," who at the time, Merv Griffin, they gave Merv Griffin his start actually as a dancer on their show. So Merv was around. And so I definitely knew they were famous, but I think what was nice for us grandchildren was that we were enough removed from it that it was fun, but we weren't their children, which, and from my mother and her sister, I think being the children of celebrities had all the stuff you read about. It's complicated. Your parents belong to other people. They're traveling all the time. So,
you mentioned this to me, but the fact that you were on TV and your grandparents were on TV. Do you think there's any connection there? Like, was TV kind of in your blood?
Even though they were entertaining and I was informing, I think there's a we're all kind of hams in my family. Give us a microphone at a party and we're happy to get up and make a toast.
Now, can Jewish people be hams?
Yeah, good question. I love that. I do think that there was kind of a comfort with, being in front of the camera that came a little from our grandparents and their world of television. Barbara, I don't know if you are able to find the pictures we have of from my grandparents' TV show. The blonde woman, Barbara, who's leaning back against the man, and then there's the man with the cigar leaning over the woman. Going back to your celebrity question, we were very aware that our grandparents knew a lot of famous people and that they were famous too. And that was for us mostly just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
We danced a lot. Not formally. I did go to dancing school in New Haven, but I would have probably gone to that. I had nothing to do with being related to Arthur Murray. It was a thing that they had. And so I got a little more polished in my ballroom dancing in, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But I have 3 older sisters, and we definitely, as corny as it sounds, some of our entertainment was like pushing back the furniture and dancing. And now it wasn't all ballroom dancing. Sometimes it was just like dancing to the Beatles and, Motown and that kind of thing. But we definitely knew a few steps from our grandparents. And, it was just kind of part of our life. And to this day, our family has a dance party down in Old Saybrook where we go in the summer. We have it every other year, Labor Day weekend. And even though it's not ballroom dancing, I think for us, it's just a very natural thing. Like dancing is kind of, in our blood, and it's our thing. It's something we love, and if we're at a wedding, photo I wanted to mention, that is Groucho Marx with my grandmother. And on the, a photo from the television show. And Groucho Marx, my grandparents, and my mother and her sister moved out to Hollywood at one point when when the girls were teenagers. I'm not quite sure why, if there was a possible film thing or whatever, but my grandparents decided to move out there for a few years. And they were very good friends with Groucho Marx and his family. And I think it was probably part of that, we've discussed this, is that like they were, the Jews who were all kind of pretending they weren't Jews. Now, maybe back in the 40s and 50s, everybody knew Groucho Marx was Jewish. I have no idea, but I think there was a kind of kinship among them, and part of the fun. And you might have noticed the identical nature of my mother and her sister Jane. And apparently what Groucho used to say to remember which girl was which, he'd say, Jane's the one without the mole. And that's how he would say it. And my mother, who is now 96 and doesn't remember everything. If you bring up, I said, Mom, what would Groucho say? He'd look at her and say, Jane's the one without the mole. Anyway.
That's hysterical. Did you know the other Marx brothers too?
No, I didn't know them. My mother and her sister knew Groucho. I don't know if the other ones were around. I can't answer that, but the stories I always heard was about Groucho and him singing Lydia, 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 tattooed lady on the piano and stuff. And my mother and her sister would laugh uproariously. Groucho was so funny and so much fun. And I guess the rest of Groucho's family would sort of sit there. They didn't, I suppose that's part of being a comedian, your own family's kind of tired of your shtick, and then the newcomers coming in are like, tell us another joke.
Oh, that's funny. And you said you met him too, and you, right? And you
I didn't meet Groucho, no.
Oh, you didn't meet Groucho.
Yes, sadly. Yeah, I did not, but
Wow. I'm wondering, Barbara, do you think we could just kind of go through the pictures? Can you put them up? I know clearly we're having a little bit of difficulty with that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that, everybody. But do you think you could, and then Duby can comment on them in whatever order you're able to?
Yes.
Is that good, Duby?
Yeah, that's great. So there's Groucho with the trademark cigar.
Looks very much like Donna Berman and
Sure, everybody. I apologize that I'm having some technical difficulties.
No problem.
Yeah, that's not a problem. By the way, everybody, that's Barbara Gunterman, who's our wonderful house manager tonight. Is it possible, you think? No pressure, Barbara. Do you think you can get some other ones?
Yeah,
photos?
let's do this. Let me just go in from what was sent to me.
Oh
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And then we'll just show everybody what we have. How about that?
I'm also wondering.
Perfect.
Let's see. So those are my grandparents. That's probably, I think that's a photo that was used on a cover of a record album. They had many, many albums of dance music, waltz music. You buy an album, Martha Murray and Kathryn are on the front. So we have untold numbers of photos of them dancing around our homes, which is nice. And I love the dresses. She really had some amazing dresses.
Oh my God, just beautiful. Duby, what was your grandmother like?
She was very, what, before I answered that, I'm wondering if my cousin Jan Heimlich was able to join. And if she is, I don't know if it's possible to technically pull someone out of the crowd or not, but Jan was going to join, and she's about my age, and I thought we could share recollections.
I can stop screen sharing and take a look and see if she's here.
Oh, Jan is here.
Oh, there's Jan. She just said I'm
Hi,
here.
Jan. Duby, you're not going to believe this, but Mark Hassler is a dear friend, and he just texted me and said, some of us still have our Arthur Murray steps, and he took a photograph of the steps.
Oh, no, that's amazing.
I have a photograph right here in my text with the steps.
Oh, that's funny. Wow.
Yeah. Jan, Barbara's going to unmute you.
Oh, cool. That's a great photo of my grandfather. He was, that's just a great shot. My grandmother was on the surface just party hostess. When we would come visit her in Honolulu, there was an entire calendar of parties we were going to. We were going to the Bermans for brunch. We were going to the Smiths. She was a social animal.
Really?
Yes. That was really her love. She was made to be on television. She was a real performer.
And
Um,
Jan, you're
hello.
unmuted.
oh, I hear Jan.
Yep.
Hello, Jan.
Hi, Duby. It's great to see you and everybody.
Hi, Jan. Thanks for
Jan,
being here.
what have I missed as I'm trying to talk about
Oh.
Grandpa and his relationship to his Jewish roots that he was trying so hard to
You know, you have hit on
bury?
so many fascinating things that I did not know. I really appreciate you, just taking the time to learn more about Grandpa's background. I think that I was always a bit perplexed about how he felt about Judaism, because, like you were saying, we had a Christmas tree in our house, and they had a Christmas tree in their house, and yet every once in a while, Grandpa would come out with like a Jewish rule of some kind. You never should eat fruit after pizza or something. And
Yes.
I could never quite figure out, because he would go back to that, like you mentioned. So, I knew that he felt a connection, but I wonder if he was also conflicted, because in his to be well known and get ahead in what he was trying to do, like when he had to change his name early on, which I think he had to do for practical reasons. I wonder just how conflicted that may have left him.
Yes, and Jan, I'm remembering one time we were visiting them in Honolulu, and I ordered a steak for dinner, and then I ordered ice cream for dessert. And he turned to me and said, "You shouldn't mix the meat and dairy." And I said, "What?" I'm this little Protestant kid from what? And he said, "The kosher dietary laws." And I was remember thinking to myself, like, that's
Where-
kind of funny coming from you, Grandpa.
Yeah, where did that
You
come
would
from?
never acknowledged that you were Jewish, but that's okay.
Right. And one thing that both my mother and Doobie's mother underwent at a pretty young age, when they were about 13, is they both had surgery on their noses.
Oh.
And I'm gonna sort of guess that it was partly just to fit in, because they were not just, in among Jewish circles and their social lives, but I don't know much about that, but I think that was mostly Grandma's decision.
Yeah, I think so too. One very interesting aspect of our family dynamic is that, I think we know that for celebrities, hanging on to their fame is kind of an important thing. And as you get older, your fame often fades away a little bit. Well, as I think I told you, Donna, Jan's mother, Jane, my mom's twin sister, married both girls wanted a normal, they always said, white picket fence life. They'd grown up with celebrity parents who were sometimes around and sometimes weren't always nice to them. They wanted normal lives. And I think my mother got that. My father was an educator and they lived in New Haven. I'm sorry, Jan, I'm telling your family story for you, but as Jane has written, she marries a nice Jewish doctor whose name is never going to appear outside of anywhere except like an obscure medical journal. Well, Jan's father, Jane's husband, he invented something called the Heimlich maneuver, named after him, Henry Heimlich. So suddenly in the 70s, Jan, and in the 80s, Dr. Heimlich, the son-in-law of Arthur and Kathryn, is becoming as famous or more famous than they were. And I do remember, Jan, and I don't know if you picked up, if you saw this, but Grandma and Grandpa didn't always like that the son-in-law, even though he was doing this by saving hundreds and thousands of lives, they didn't always like that people were like, oh, your grandson's Dr. Heimlich.
Yeah, I think there was a conflict there emotionally. I don't remember them ever treating my father badly, but I also don't recall them kind of ever celebrating his successes. And why that is, I really don't know. I can tell you, you mentioned that they lived in Rye for a time. And at that time I was growing up in Rye. We were actually on the same property. We were across the driveway from Grandma and Grandpa. And that was not a fun time for my parents because they were kind of under the thumb of Grandma and Grandpa, whereas I thought it was fantastic because I could, get up in the morning and run over and sit in the kitchen with Grandma. I mean, it was wonderful. I loved having them so close. So that was really special to me. And then visiting them and in Honolulu, like Duby was saying.
But I see Jennifer in the chat. Jennifer Honan says, any thoughts on why they retired so far from New York? And that's such a good question, because on the one hand, they were great, wonderful grandparents to us, but there was always a feeling, I know in my family, like, could they have moved any farther away? I mean, they did, fly us out there frequently for holidays and things like that, but it kind of bummed us out. But, I mean, there was a remoteness to them that I think that our mothers felt from their parents. And, I think I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I have all of my mother's writings, and I don't just mean professionally, because as Duby's mentioned, she was an author, but she wrote her entire life, even from the time she was a child. And so I have letters that she wrote, many, many, many letters from camp or someplace that they were sent away to. So to my grandparents, just saying, I can't wait for us to spend some time together. We really, miss you. And clearly they just really didn't have a lot of time with their parents, who were, very busy with the show and other things. But I loved my time with my grandparents. I think one thing I found intriguing was that while Grandpa appeared publicly so stiff, and in fact, there was one Arthur Murray party episode where he appears at the end and he tries to sing, and it goes very badly, all on purpose. And then some guy says, Arthur, I think we can help you out. And all the men grab him like he's a piece of wood and carry him off the stage. He was very stiff, but there was this, I want to say, giggly nature about Grandpa. He loved to just say silly jokes. He would be silly. And as a kid, I thought that was great. But I think, like Duby was saying, some people do mellow in their older years. I think that was the case with him.
And I'm just so struck reading in your mother's memoir, Jan, what a difficult life that was for any of us who had relatives, ancestors who came over on steerage and lived just
those tenement.
I haven't been to the tenement museum yet. I'm sure many people on this Zoom have. I'm dying to see it. And the irony, Jan, I know I've told you this, is that my grandfather fought tooth and nail to get out of the Lower East Side. And now one of my daughters is paying $2,000 a month for the privilege to live there. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, that is. And that sounds almost a little low priced.
Yeah, right.
It's
That's
probably
right.
2,200. Yeah, she's got a
Yeah.
roommate too.
If I'd love to just share one other thing about grandma, if I may. So as Duby was saying, she was the hostess, the MC of the show. She had had no training in theater, dance, or anything. And she not only was the MC, but she was in almost all the skits, which often meant dressing up as a hobo or whatever the costume was. She did acrobatics. I mean, it was phenomenal. And I was just running across a photo of her. I've seen this before, but not this particular shot. This was probably taken in the early 60s. She was in a yoga double lotus
Oh
position.
my-
Now, who in those days ever even heard of yoga? And yet she was able to do that. So she clearly had, she was flexible and could do so many things physically, but she was very small. She was 5 feet tall.
Wow. When did they die?
I would-
years.
I would say 90 and 98, in that decade. I mean, so it's been, 20 or so years since they've both been gone.
Wow.
Oh, and if I could add one other thing about grandma, because I found this so fascinating. When we had the memorial for her in Honolulu, I wanted to put together a video that was a compilation of different scenes from the TV show, because she was in so many of the scenes. And it was one of the most fun projects for me. I just edited, I got to look through reel after reel after reel and then put together this kind of best of. It was just so much fun. And one other well-known person that they knew very well was Dick Clark, who was a little kid who lived in their apartment building, and grandma was really good friends with his mother. And to this day, the Dick Clark Studios has all of the kinescopes. Well, they've copied a lot of them now to other things, but so all of those shows are preserved at Dick Clark Studios.
Right.
Wow. It's quite a childhood your moms had and you had too. I mean, it's really remarkable. Would it be okay with you if we switched over to looking at the pictures and then we can open it up to questions?
Oh, sure. I don't want to keep people too late. They might need to go eat dinner.
Everybody's got to go dance.
Yeah, everyone's gonna go
in their kitchens.
Put a little fun in your life. Try dancing, as Grandpa.
That's right. Barbara's going to give it a shot with looking at the pictures because they're remarkable.
I know. I want you to see Jane Wyman.
Oh yeah, and Jane Wyman.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share this one. It's a very small picture. I'm sorry, I can't make it any bigger. I don't know why. Oh, we already saw this one.
We
One
saw
second.
Groucho. Yeah.
We saw Groucho. Let me go back. Let's go here. And then, oh, this one. Yeah.
You could do a whole show, Donna, with Jan talking about growing up as the daughter of Dr. Heinrich too.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
That's hard to see. I know what that is. That's Grandma and Grandpa on their honeymoon in the 20s on shipboard, and so he was kind of I know it's hard to see. He was kind of the famous dancer already. So, they're posed in a dance pose there on shipboard.
Sorry, I don't know why it's so small. I can't make it any bigger.
While you're getting it, Duby, can I share how Grandma and Grandpa met?
Oh, yes. It's a nice story.
Grandpa was appearing on a radio show, and they had like live audiences in the studio, and so he was teaching dancing over the radio. Tell me if I have any of this incorrect, by the way, Duby. But so he was teaching whatever the dance was, and then he would go over and ask a woman in the audience to dance with him, and he chose Grandma. So she was dancing with him and said to him, "Wait till I tell my grandchildren that I got to dance with Arthur Murray."
That's funny.
And he supposedly
That's
thought to
funny.
himself, maybe it will be our grandchildren.
Oh, that's right.
That's what your mother wrote in the book.
That's right. I'm glad you remember.
Wow. You know what we'll do? I tell you what, we'll put all these photos up on our website. Barbara, are you able to put any of the other ones up at all right now, or too much pressure? We don't want you to feel
No.
pressure.
No pressure at all. I just feel bad that they're not coming up the way they should. Let me just pull them up.
And if you're interested in seeing more photos, my mother's memoir is called Out of Step, and she has lots of wonderful photos in her book.
Great. That's great. Yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments, Donna.
Yeah. Anybody? Oh, yeah, thank you. Out of Step by Jane Heimlich. That's great. So let's open it up. Barbara, actually, I can do it, right? Because I'm the host too. We can, how do we do that?
Oh, I see Joan Walden, who I love, made a very interesting comment that Singer Sewing Machine Company is the oldest franchise.
Oh, wow. Because somebody asked if it was the Fred Astaire studios.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Oh,
No,
that's-
I don't think Fred Astaire, I don't think he really opened studios till quite a bit later.
Oh.
He did all his dancing.
Is that Jane Wyman?
Oh yeah, I missed that with the blonde hair.
But
That's Jane Wyman, who we know is an actress, but was also Ronald Reagan's first wife. She's very blonde there, which I think she normally, in later years had dark
Yeah, she had
hair.
very dark hair in later years. Yeah.
Yeah. This is my sister. My mother is Phyllis, is bottom middle. And that's me upper left with my sisters, Martha, Katie, and Meg. I just threw that in there because I liked seeing all of us. I think we covered all the pictures. I think we got them all up there.
Okay, and we'll post them on our website. Maybe we'll actually send them out in a blast. If that's okay with you, Duby, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, great. Barbara, can you let everybody unmute if they want to and turn their cameras on if they want to? Jan, we're dying to see you.
Yeah.
if you're willing. And anybody you can raise your hand, you could put a question in the chat, whatever you'd like. And we'll say, maybe another 15 minutes or so, because
Sure.
hi, Jan. Welcome. All right, I'm going to put it on gallery now. Everybody. So, raise your hand mechanically or raise your hand with your real hand. Yep, there are places to dance in the Hartford area for anyone's interested. That's right. So, that was a good comment.
Yes.
Tiffany, beautiful memories. Oh, thanks for sharing. Oh, Tiff, glad you're here. Oh, Marty Levine. Hi, Mark. Marty Levine, you have a question?
Yes. Could you hear me, first of all?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So, Duby, do you now consider yourself as Jewish? And do your daughters now consider themselves Jewish, going back, halachically?
Right. I think in many ways I do consider myself Jewish because I know that's, but at the same time, I'm a very regular congregational churchgoer. So I guess I consider myself both. My daughters, unfortunately, and they may change too. Not unfortunately, but the daughter who's been dating a Jewish boy for 7 or 8 years, this is Grace, Jan. I say to her sometimes, well, if you and Michael, if you get married, it's great because you're Jewish. She says, Mom, I'm not Jewish. I'm a quarter Jewish, So you you bring up a wonderful point, and it's, as you can see, I'm kind of working through it and how I feel about it.
It's interesting because a lot of people, when they do these genetics tests and then they find out they're Jewish.
Yeah.
And then, like, what do you do with that information? I mean, you found out, how old were you when you found out, when you realized, oh,
I think more like 10 years old or something like that.
yeah. But
Sort
even
of-
at 10, you have an identity. And then when you have this new information about yourself, it's not that easy to navigate.
Because we were going to church every Sunday. So it's like, we are, I mean, mom is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also begs the question of, is anything ever one thing? Is anybody
Right.
ever
No,
one
that's
thing?
so
Like
true.
multiple identity, in terms of gender, in terms of all kinds of stuff. It's an interesting question. Joan Walden, how are you? You have a question?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. I'm just needing a minute to do all the technology. Yeah,
Joan.
you all. I do. I one quick thing. I gave a course recently at Avery Heights in Hartford, which is a senior retirement community, and it was about movies, and a lot of it had to do with dancing. And at the end, one of the women who I'm guessing is in her 80s at least, still goes to the Arthur Murray studios to every week to dance. And I gave some background actually, and she was thrilled. She was just absolutely thrilled. So I just want to tell you, it's the legacy lives on.
I love that.
Yeah. The other thing, I had a question though, and the question was, are any of the grandchildren in show business? Have they opted for show business careers?
Our generation of the grandchildren.
Right. Yes, your children and your yeah.
And Jan, what would you say? I mean, no one's really in show business. I suppose TV news was the closest,
Yeah, and then I was a radio reporter, but I really no. Well, my one of my brothers, he's a musician, and he performed in San Francisco with a very popular band, but I kind of think almost all of us have been in the limelight for one reason or another, just not in show business.
And what about the great-grandchildren? Any of them?
Not so far. No.
Not my daughter. Her cousin, my brother's son, is studying film production, so that's kind of related. I think he wants to be behind the camera.
Duby, tell everybody what you told me. Jan, this has to do with your family, about Thanksgiving at Jan's family's house.
Two things. A friend once said to me, when they realized that my uncle Jan's father was Dr. Heimlich, they said, "Oh my gosh, your Thanksgiving table is the safest place to be in America. If anyone chokes." And then Colin McEnroe, who many of you may know, radio host, said, "Duby, between Arthur Murray and Dr. Heimlich, your family motto should be dance till you choke."
That's a good one.
Told you that, Jan.
Yeah, that's good.
That's really funny. That's really funny.
Funny.
Oh my God.
Oh, I
Anybody
just
else?
remembered. I'm so sorry. I just remembered that we do have someone who was in show business on my dad's side. Anson Will, huh?
Patsy?
Yeah. Anson Williams, from the show Happy Days, who played the Potsy.
What?
Yeah, he's like my dad's second cousin, and his original name was Anson. I don't know about the Williams, but Anson Williams Heimlich is what he was originally. But I don't know if Williams was original at all. But yeah, he
Wait, he's
he's
Jewish?
yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Apparently, speaking of changing names, I got this from the book about Grandpa. Despite the painful circumstances that caused a great many Jews to change their names, Daddy enjoyed poking fun at Jews with Gentile names. At a party, I watched with some trepidation as my father was introduced to a Burton Smith. I could tell from the mischievous glint in my father's eyes what was coming. What was your name before Smith? Which is the kind of thing he would have said.
And what was your name before Arthur Murray?
Exactly.
And that's funny. Anybody else have any questions? Speak now.
Speak now.
Mark, can you hold up the feet? The footprints?
Sure, I can actually, I have quite the collection of Arthur Murray books dating from 1924, and I can actually show a few of these.
Oh my gosh. The Modern Dances by
Wow.
Arthur Murray. That
The
is
the earliest one I have is from 1924, and I'll get the steps.
wow, you're
Is that incredible? Mark is a
So
wonderful
this
dancer.
is How to Become a Good Dancer by Arthur Murray,
great.
and it came with this whole collection of steps.
That's fantastic.
And there was, oh, the best one is, hang on one second,
That is amazing.
was Start.
Wow. And Mark, you like to dance as well?
So I've been dancing since 1977, and I started with the dances of the 1600s, but my true love is actually the dances of the 1800s and early 1900s. And so in fact, Vernon and Irene Castle, I've been studying those dances for 38 years. And yes, and it's sort of as part of learning about vintage dance, you do learn about Arthur Murray. I mean, you can't, he is part of the history. And actually, it's interesting. I don't know if he's on. He was going to be on tonight. A gentleman by the name of Richard Powers, who's my mentor, and he actually had the pleasure of meeting Jane and Phyllis.
Oh,
And because he really wanted to learn about Arthur Murray. And actually, Richard is originally from the Cincinnati area.
oh,
So met Jane first,
right. Where Jan grew up, the Heimlichs. Yeah.
and then Jane introduced him to Phyllis.
Oh,
So a lot of us in the vintage dance world are very familiar with Arthur Murray and his history, though I don't think any of us were familiar with the fact that he was Jewish and he had changed his name. I didn't learn that until a few days ago. But yes, I've got a relatively complete collection of Arthur Murray how to dance books.
Mark, that is great. I'm so glad to meet you. That's just fantastic.
Yeah, amazing. Rachel Davis says Hartford Community Dance, Waltz and Contra, Hartford Ballroom, various dances, Amherst College, always is what she wrote.
That's so great to know. You know, I am going to, I think it's Fred Astaire, a friend goes to the Fred Astaire studio. She's always apologizing, like, I'm sorry. I'm like, no
Go to the
problem.
competition.
But she invited me to go next Thursday because there are going to be some Arthur Murray instructors who are from Ukraine.
Oh.
And they're going to be there. And she said, Duby, I think it would be wonderful, exciting for them to meet you. And I said, oh my gosh, I'd be excited to meet them. But Anyway, just bring that up because I think there are a lot of dance parties at both the various Arthur Murray and the Fred Astaire studios as well.
Did they know it? Did they know each other?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I imagine they must have crossed paths in the 40s and 50s, but I don't know that for sure.
If I could interject one more piece.
Yes.
If anyone would like to see some of the dances that Arthur Murray would have learned and taught when he was at the castle, when he was learning from Vernon and Irene Castle, I do have a YouTube channel, the Vintage Dance Society, and we have some of the same dances that Arthur would have learned from the castles.
Oh,
Wow,
cool.
that's amazing.
Thank you, Mark. Carolyn and Leslie asked, do you know the name of the town from which he emigrated? My grandparents came from the same region.
I'm looking for the book so I can look that up. Hi, Carolyn and Leslie. It's so nice to see them on
It's
here.
great to see you.
At the end of this, I'll look for the book and I'll see. I don't know that we had the exact name. Don't.
Oh.
Hey, great to see
Hey,
you.
good to see you. So we have time for one more question, if anybody has one.
Joan Walden has her hand up. I'm not sure if she still has a question or if that's already been answered.
Joan, was that from before?
Yes, it was. Sorry about that. I should have taken it down. I will figure that out. Thank
No,
you.
that's okay. That's okay. This has been so delightful. Oh my God.
Me.
Duby, thank you so much. Jan, thank you for joining us. Everyone, thank you for being here tonight. It was really a blast from the past. And, you know, Duby, your loveliness and your graciousness and your kindness, they just shine through you no matter what you're talking about. And I think we all felt that tonight. We're very grateful to you. Jan, you added so much to the evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
In our Charter Oak Blast, we started doing this thing called kitchen dancing. So there's always going to be like a little video that you can dance to, and let's all do that now in honor of Arthur Murray. What a legacy he had. Thank you for sharing it with us. Blessings, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Yep,
Thank
great
you.
job.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Love
Thank you.
Bye. Love you too. Bye.